And the next thing we can go over here quick is some different selection methods. So just to make it easier to see, I'm going to turn all to solid again. So what we can do here is I'm just going to highlight around a portion here to highlight some things or to have things selected. So if we look at our button bindings down in the lower left corner, if I hit my shift key on my keyboard, we can see that our left click turns into select plus. So this would be if I want to add anything to the current selection that I already have selected. So by holding down my shift key, I can come through and I can just left click, and now we can see that that beam is added to the selection, and if I left click here, that beam would be added as well. You can also highlight things, so if we wanted to highlight, say, this whole row of beams, what we could do is we could come over here and holding the shift key, I could just highlight around all these members here, and now all of those are a part of the selection. If I want to deselect something, I can hit Control on my keyboard, and now we see our left click is select minus. So I could come through here and I could just click on these beams, and you can see that they're being deselected from the current selection list that we have. If I want to highlight or use a box, I could do that as well by holding Control, and now you can see that those are deselected as well. Another thing that we can do here is if we hold Shift and Control, we can see that the left click is now toggle. So if I highlight over, say, this portion right here, we can see that those are all deselected. If I would highlight over that again, it would be selecting again. So it kind of works in that manner where it would both be selecting and deselect things. So another thing we can do to select things is we can use our right click menus again. So if I come over here and I look at this beam, if I want to select this beam, I could come over here and I could right click, and because I'm on the main material over here, I could come over here to select other, and I get a couple different options, either the material, so that would be the material for that beam, the W65, or I could select the entire member, B38. So if I select that, we can see that that highlights. Now another thing to take a look at, if I come over here, if I right click on this and go to the select other, we can see we have a couple more options. We have the material W65, B38, or the material W63, or the B45 member. So because I selected where these two beams come into each other, that means I get a couple different options. I also have the options if I want to select all W63 or all W65. So you got to be a little bit careful with where you're selecting or where you're right clicking if you're going to select things like that. Another thing to look at here is selecting with your bounding boxes. So one thing to show here is if I would go from right to left, so if I start over here and I left click and I go from my right to my left, we see we get a dotted line box. So what that's going to do is that's going to highlight everything within that box and everything that touches those lines. So if I would click here, or if I would draw a box this way, we can see that it highlights everything that was touching that box, within the box, and these other members as well. So if I would do it the opposite way, if I go from left to right, we can see that the box is no longer dotted. So what it's going to select now is everything that is inside of that box. So if I just unclick my selection there, we can see that it got, if I do this again, we can see that it only gets what is within that box. So again, if I demonstrate this the other way, if I do from right to left, because my lines are touching all three of those beams, it's going to highlight or select all three of those beams. If I only wanted to select the column and the connection components here, I could highlight from left to right, and we can see that it only selects it that way.